Hi everybody, this is going to be another physical effects of corseting video, and it's probably going to be one of my probably more anticipated videos because I get so many questions from people asking me, what happens when you corset? What happens to your core muscles? Does it atrophy? Do you snap in half when you take the corset off? So I'm going to be answering those questions today. So first, covering atrophy and posture. This is probably one of the biggest questions I get related to muscles and corsets and whether tight lacing can cause atrophy. So if you wear your corset 23 hours a day, 7 days a week, only taking it off to shower and change, then it is true that you may experience some muscle atrophy, especially in your oblique muscles. Those that do experience atrophy, they might get fatigued easily, being unsupported by their corset, standing long periods of time, but nobody has ever completely flopped over or snapped in half from my research. Moreover, the risk of atrophy also depends on how long and how tight you wear your corset. So if you're wearing your corset with more than, say, a 4 to 6 inch reduction, of course this depends on body fat percentage as well, it's more likely that your corset will force your muscles to stretch out and encourage them to relax. And this is great for people who have over-tense muscles and they experience, say, cramps and muscle spasms in their back. But relaxation over too long a time is what can cause atrophy over that extended time. If you think of somebody who is on bed rest and they never get up and walk around, their legs atrophy the same way. Some people, however, have experienced that when wearing their corset at a slightly lighter reduction, so they're not cinching quite as small, it has helped them to improve their posture at all times, even when they're uncorseted, just through basic muscle memory. And I had talked about that in a previous video about corsets, posture, and confidence, which I'll link right up there. So furthermore, being corseted can encourage people to keep their abdominal muscles engaged at all times. While I don't necessarily condone trying to force your muscles to flex in a corset, typically you don't have to fight nor help what the corset is doing if the corset is constructed well. Sometimes I occasionally flex and push my abdominal muscles against the front of the corset as an isotonic exercise. So I'm just pushing my abdominals out that way. And then I'll try to pull my abdominal muscles inward and bring it as far away from the front wall of the corset as possible, with a focus on this latter exercise. So complete and total atrophy of your core muscles is not inevitable in a corset, and in some cases it can help you to keep them more engaged. In a recent SciShow talk show, Michael Aranda and Hank Green had discussed spinal posture and how slouching can be encouraged by the ligaments between the vertebrae stretching over time. So the more you slouch, the more you're encouraged to slouch because your spine is literally stretching out that way. And it was also proposed that developing a neutral, relaxed, yet healthy posture can be restored by diligently maintaining your proper posture for such a long time that the ligaments of your spine will actually shorten back. And the muscles of the back will become accustomed to basically holding this position, this posture. And so proper posture can be enjoyed pretty much effortlessly by that point. So I'm going to link that video up right up there for you if you want to see more about it. Unfortunately, until the day comes that your ligaments actually do shorten, many people find it kind of exhausting to hold an erect posture at all times, or they often forget and then they begin to slouch again unconsciously. So wearing a corset can serve as a reminder to maintain proper postures at all times that you're wearing it. And basically, even if it's an underbust corset, it doesn't have to go right up to your chest. Even as an underbust corset, it sets up your lumbar vertebrae and kind of allows everything to sort of stack properly so you can maintain proper posture, keep your shoulders back. So your corset can encourage you to do this whether or not your core muscles are engaged. So if you do want to consistently use your own core muscles, then you just wear your corset at a relatively light reduction, so you have to keep yourself in an upright position. But my point is, if you're wearing your corset and it's setting up your posture to be straight, it will eventually encourage you to keep that posture, and it can shorten the ligaments of your spine if you do have a slouching problem, so that you can have better posture over time even when you're not wearing the corset. So now let's move on to muscle tone and how it affects your corseting progress. Because many people are afraid of exercising, they avoid exercising their core muscles because they think that muscle is less compressible than fat and that well-toned muscles become larger and bulkier over time, and that it can be more difficult to achieve their corseting goals if they exercise their core muscles. And yes and no. So just a quick muscle physiology lesson. The functional part of your muscles are called sarcomeres. So this includes the myocytes and the myofibrils inside of those, which are responsible for the actual contraction of your muscles. So surrounding the sarcomeres is basically the sarcoplasm. And if you think of any type of plasm, cytoplasm, it's full of sugar and nutrients, and it's watery, and it has proteins like myoglobin that brings oxygen to the muscle cells. So basically, this is what nourishes the muscle cells themselves, the actual part that contracts. So there are two elements to muscle growth, or what you would call hypertrophy. There's sarcomere hypertrophy, which increases the muscle density and also improves your muscle performance, but it doesn't actually have a huge effect on the size of the muscle. Also, there is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So basically this makes the muscle bigger by increasing that area that surrounds those sarcomeres. But it doesn't necessarily improve the performance of the muscle because it involves the part of the muscle that doesn't do any contraction. So exercising your core can increase the size of the muscles, but most women usually don't have to worry about this happening. But there are ways to increase your muscle tone, your muscle density and strength without actually changing much of the muscle size. So, I mean, this would obviously depend on your genetic predisposition to building muscle. And I didn't study exercise science in depth, but there are literally hundreds of forums on these exercise sites that go into more detail about this. There are ways that you can exercise to increase either the size of your muscle or the performance of it. A little bit of both is always going to happen, but you can focus more on the functionality and less on the actual size. So moving on to exercising out of the corset, I would always recommend exercise and toning your body, whether you wear corsets or not, because they're not meant to replace diet and exercise. But if you do plan to wear a corset more than about 8 to 12 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, unless you're only wearing your corset to sleep, I would definitely make daily core training a strict part of your regimen. So it doesn't have to be a whole lot of exercise, and it doesn't have to be necessarily complicated. I mean, I gained considerable core strength just by following Pilates instructional videos, as almost every move in Pilates, it actually teaches you to keep your core tight and inward, keep your belly button pressed to your spine, as they say, keep your rib cage in and your muscles engaged at all times. And this helps you gain a lot of tone without making it your muscles basically push out and become more bulky. So on what I call my lazy days, some regular maintenance exercises that I do include 3 of the following sets of usually about 50 bicycle crunches, more if I can stand it, 30 reverse crunches, or what some people call leg lifts, and 20 seconds of planking. And planks, they not only strengthen your abdominal muscles, but also strengthen the lumbar area because you're keeping your spine straight off the ground while you're actually facing the ground. You can also do push-ups, and this will also strengthen your core. So if you really want to work out your oblique section, then you can also do some side kicks, like with kickboxing or martial arts. This will definitely strengthen this area. And I mean, a lot of these exercises, it takes less than 10 minutes. I also keep my core engaged while I'm working out on the elliptical machine, and I actually do feel the difference compared to when I keep my core engaged versus not. So I will link some other YouTube videos down in the description below of some pretty good core exercise routines that I've found on YouTube. So one of the big questions I get is whether you can actually change the shape of your oblique muscles to give your body naturally a more hourglass shape from the corset. And whether or not you can do this is kind of disputed because it's worked for some people and it hasn't for others. But if it does really work, then here's my hypothesis as to how it works. Basically, when you're intensely working out your muscles, doing weightlifting, resistance, and whatnot, the fibers in your muscles actually break down and they have to be rebuilt by your body. So they're usually rebuilt denser and stronger, as it's thought that your body is trying to prevent such mild injury from occurring again in the future. And this is why they say, when you finish working out, have a protein shake or something between half an hour and an hour after your workout, because this is when your muscles are rebuilding. So directly after exercise, when your muscles are still warm and they're broken and they're tangled, is when a lot of people recommend that you stretch your muscles to help realign the fibers and encourage them to heal the right way. So corseting, especially with certain silhouettes like this one, it can definitely stretch the oblique muscles here. So due to my schedule, I tend to wear my corset more in the evenings. I try to plan out my days such that I can do some intense activity, some intense exercise, take a shower, and then just throw on my corset, I guess, within an hour of finishing my workout. So my muscles are still warm, they're still kind of complacent at that point. And I've suggested this schedule to others, finish working out, immediately take your shower, throw on your corset as soon as possible after you finish working out. And people who have followed this same regimen had reported back that it's easier to get a stronger cinch in their corset this way compared to trying to wear your corset over fully, I guess, what you call healed muscle that's, is not warmed up and it's dense. So if your oblique muscles are indeed encouraged into rebuilding themselves in an hourglass shape using the corset, this would be the best way that I can think of doing this, because even if you do have very toned muscle, when it's broken, when it's soft and complacent and warm and it can be stretched out, then you can actually encourage the muscle fibers to rebuild themselves using the guide of the corset. Fran Blanche, who is the owner and corseteer of Contour Corsets, she actually tested the long-term semi-permanent effects of waist training on herself for about a year, and she fashioned a sports corset that was specifically designed to take the stress of exercising. And this is rather important because exercising in any old corset can possibly ruin it. So she made a corset specifically designed for this, and it's also worth noting that she also has a relatively low body fat percentage, and she is a hardcore waist trainer. She wore her corset at about a 35% reduction, which would be the equivalent of somebody going from a 30-inch natural waist down to about a 19-inch corseted waist. And basically this is what she had reported. She said, quote, "My persistence of shape when out of the corset was high, and I could palpate my muscles, so I know that the muscle wall had adopted the corset shape when out of the corset, about 4 to 5 inches larger than the closed corset interior waist size. But, as I said, I do not know of anyone else who did high reduction tight lacing with cardio in a specially designed sports corset, so my results may have been unique." It's worth stating that I don't necessarily condone working out in a corset. I don't personally do it with any of my corsets. I do know of some weightlifters who actually use corsets in lieu of a weightlifting belt to support their abdomens, very lightly laced, but unless you're already experienced in both corseting and the exercises that you're doing, you know how to pace yourself, and preferably you monitor your cardiac output and your respiration so that you're not pushing yourself too hard while wearing a corset. And if you have a corset specifically designed for exercise, if you don't have all those things in order, I would err on the side of not exercising in your corset, because you don't know if it's going to damage your corset or yourself. So I had mentioned a little bit earlier in this video that certain silhouettes and certain reductions of corsets can actually stretch out your oblique muscles. So imagine the line that your oblique muscles form when uncorseted. In general, it goes more or less in a straight line up and down. So when you're bending to one side, obviously one oblique becomes more stretched as the distance between your rib cage and your iliac crest actually increases. So when you're corseted, you bring the obliques in, and following the fact that a curve is longer than a straight line from point A to point B, it stands to reason that a corset mimics stretching of the oblique muscles basically simultaneously on both sides. So when you first start corseting, you may experience this as a little bit of soreness, or maybe warm or tingling or hot feeling that's reminiscent of, say, when you're stretching your hamstrings after a run. So this is another reason that I definitely recommend that you go slowly with your corseting, because your muscles as well as the tendons need time to increase their elasticity and to accommodate this type of reduction in order to prevent injury. I feel that when I'm tight lacing a little bit more intensely, then I notice my flexibility in the sides of my torso increases, and when I'm doing my side stretches or my side bends, obviously not wearing a corset, I feel that I can reach a little further compared to when I'm not tight lacing quite so intensely. There's an article online called the Contortionist's Handbook, and in that article is a short blurb about the effects of combining contortion with tight lacing, which is supposedly practiced by certain individuals in Germany, the Netherlands, and Russia. The author writes, quote, "The contortion training makes it easier for them to tight lace rather extremely, as well as the tight lacing helps them to get more limber faster, and most have been able to fold their backs a little bit over a year after beginning. One of the reasons can be that the corset simulates the effect to the body of a deep back bend or a back fold where the organs are very much compressed and displaced, and the ability to breathe deeply is reduced. The corset wearer's bodies has adapted to this due to the constriction, and therefore the positions involving the back bends are much easier to do than normally," end quote. Unfortunately, I haven't personally seen evidence or any correlation between tight lacing and being able to do back bends. I certainly can't do a back bend, although I do know that there are quite a few contortion artists who also happen to wear corsets. So I guess take this anecdote with a grain of salt. So that's all I have to say for now on the physical effects of corseting as pertaining to the muscles, particularly the muscles in your core. And if you have any other information to share, whether from your own research or personal experience, or if you have any questions about anything that I mentioned in this video, feel free to comment down below. If you liked this video and you learned something new, then please remember to click that like button and help support the channel. And for those of you who can't follow in my videos very well, or English isn't your first language or whatnot, remember that I always post articles on my blog, lucycorsetry.com, to go along with these more informational videos. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!